are coming on the air tonight with the uncertainty and unpredictability over tariffs maybe moving markets closer to a correction, with big swings in stock prices today as the U.S. and Canada escalate the tariff fight, but then also maybe kind of back off it a little bit, but then again, maybe not. We're going to break down what you need to know when we take you live to the White House, where big business leaders are sitting down with the president right now with plenty to talk about. Elon Musk's talking too as the president turns the South Lawn into kind of a showroom for Tesla late today. You see it here, the new threats from the White House against protesters at Tesla dealerships. Another market mover, the war in Ukraine, and new word now of a short-term ceasefire that Ukraine has agreed to. But will Russia? We're live in Saudi Arabia, where that deal is getting hammered out. And 5 years after the WHO declared the COVID-19 pandemic, it still feels like 2020 for some folks. The fight against long COVID, all this time later in tonight's original. Plus, why one of the most popular people in politics is making a splashy return to the spotlight, with more on the Michelle Obama factor later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and right now, President Trump is sitting down with the CEOs of some of America's biggest companies, many of which have seen their stocks tank recently as President Trump leans into tariffs and a trade war. We're talking GM, Apple, Home Depot, JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, Walmart, United, FedEx. They are all there right now. And what do they all have in common besides their attendance at this sit-down? All of their company stocks in the red since Inauguration Day. Now, President Trump says he is not going to change his tariff plans to appease, in his words, globalist companies. So why the whiplash from markets today? A couple of reasons. First, you've got this reported peace deal in Ukraine. More on that in a bit. But there's also hints that the president's crash out with Canada may be turning a corner. Ontario's Premier, Doug Ford, says he will meet with the Commerce Secretary here in Washington later this week. And Ford says he's going to back down on his push to make electricity imports more expensive for more than 1 million Americans. Now, in exchange, Ford just said last hour to my colleague Aaron Gilchrist that Secretary Lutnick pledged the president will not hike some Canadian tariffs higher. Still, there's question marks tonight on the car tariffs that could, as the president said, permanently shut down automobile manufacturing in Canada. And you know how the president needles Canada a lot, calling it the 51st state? Our team's sources say he's pretty serious about it. Kelly O'Donnell's joining us live from the White House in just a second, but I wanted to start with Brian Chung, who is at the New York Stock Exchange for us tonight. So what's up? Is this stockbrokers, freaking out and melting down, or is today a step towards stability for them, given what we've seen here in Washington? What's the vibe?
Yeah, Hallie, well, I mean, it's calm now that the traders have gone home an hour after the markets closed, but it was a crazy day following what was the worst day for stocks yesterday in 2025. Again, we saw the S&P 500 fall 2.7% yesterday, and then today we saw the S&P 500 fall another 0.8%, even though it looked like at one point during the day we were going to come off the lows after the S&P 500 opened and then fell to what was going to be correction territory. You mentioned at the top of the show, that's when a stock index or a single stock falls 10% from its most recent highs. We almost hit that mark at the close on the S&P 500. We'll have to see whether or not it hits that watermark tomorrow. But all the investors and the traders that I had been speaking to throughout the day here today were noting that the volatility is really not expected to end anytime soon. People are saying, yeah, you might see some stock buyers here because they see a discount on the stock market. But nonetheless, they don't expect that volatility to end because why? There isn't any more tariff certainty than there's been in previous days. It's really all about the news coming out of the White House. That's what has investors so spooked.
The president says this whole tariff thing is to bring manufacturing jobs back to America, which, Brian, could be easier said than done, right? Like to shift the economy back into manufacturing mode doesn't happen with the snap of the finger. We're showing over the last 30 years growth in the service sector, drop in the goods trade deficit the president hates so much, et cetera. Explain the end game here.
Yeah, and again, I think that what the administration might be looking at isn't just necessarily the trade deficit, but the balance of how the United States has basically become less of a manufacturing-based economy and more of a services-based economy compared to other countries like Mexico, for example, and especially China. Now, when you do look at the flows of exactly how U.S. manufacturing has gone in the United States, I want to point out that this is not unlike the kind of progression of developing to advanced economies over time, where it tends to be the case that developing economies start off as mainly manufacturing economies and then become advanced enough to pivot over to services-based. Now, what the Trump administration wants to do is kind of turn that the other way. Now, I want to point out that there are a number of people that do support bringing back manufacturing to the United States and trying to deprioritize imports from other countries, including some Democrats who have been vocal about even supporting these policies. There's a Western Pennsylvania Democrat, Chris Deluzio, who wrote an op-ed in the New York Times just last week advocating for this type of tariff policy, although he thinks the way Trump is doing it is wrong. And the UAW, that major auto workers union, is supporting these tariffs as well. The question is, how long does it take? It's not going to take one quarter to bring companies back to the United States. That can take years, in some cases decades, Hallie.
Brian Chung, live for us there at the New York Stock Exchange. Thank you. Let's bring it back here to Washington to Kelly O'Donnell at the White House. So, Kelly, as we said, this very interesting confluence of events here, as you're seeing the impact in the markets because of this sort of tariff trade war situation. You've got the president sitting down with some of these influential CEOs, including Jamie Dimon, who we know is somebody who has had the president's ear in the past. Is there anything that some of these business leaders could say that could get the president to change course? Or is it your sense, based on the sources you're talking to, that he is to a degree dug in on tariffs generally, even if allowing for carve-outs, et cetera?
Well, not just Dimon, certainly a number of these CEOs, sure, especially those that have that megawatt public persona. These are people that the president has long wanted their acceptance, their direct contact, to be able to work with them, to have them come and spend time with him. That was true in the first term. It's true now. And clearly, each of these CEOs is accountable to his or her shareholders, and that is a very direct relationship. And the president has put some distance between himself and the impact on the markets today in very uncharacteristic Trump talk, saying markets go up and markets go down. While that is a true statement, that is not the kind of market hyping that the president has often engaged in, wanting to see growth for American companies and success for the broader economy. So pumping the brakes there a bit. The fact that the president is dug in on tariffs can only be measured in short increments, because we have seen him change his mind based on circumstances, based on relationships, based on other influences coming in. Part of what we saw, of course, is what's happening with Canada, and there's been an intense battle there, certainly. And the president did say rather supportive things of the Ontario Premier today, who had engaged in a conversation with Secretary Lutnick, and they have tried to mend some fences and so forth. And so the president said he appreciated that. So that may be a tiny thaw in what's been a tense relationship.
Tiny. Okay. Tell me more about that word, Kelly, because I think the question is, like, how far does this thaw go, right? Because I know our team has some new reporting today that the president's pretty serious when he talks about making Canada the 51st state, which definitely ticks off Canadians and Canadian leadership, right? And so if there is a tiny thaw, what needs to happen to kind of unfreeze the dynamic in your view?
And really, this was sort of a gesture to the premier to say something complimentary. What has not happened yet is the president has not yet spoken to the next prime minister, who's just recently won the election of his party. Often, when there's an election, even before the person takes office, a prominent leader, there would be a leader call. That has not yet happened, and no indication from the White House when it will. The president was also very clear today in saying all the things that the U.S. doesn't need from Canada. Here's part of his exchange with reporters earlier.
Will you reduce it? At that, but probably so, yeah.
You're looking
he was
at
a gentleman.
Will you reduce it back?
He was a gentleman. Look, I said it before. We give Canada $200 billion a year. We subsidize Canada between all of the things we give them and trade. We give them. We don't have to have cars made in Canada. We don't have to have lumber from Canada. We have tremendous lumber. We have tremendous trees.
So you get a sense there, a taste of the kind of courteous comments about the premier and the full-on punch again about what the United States does not need from our close ally and neighbor.
Kelly O'Donnell outside the White House. I know we'll talk again fairly soon. Not sure about what, given the pace of developments today, but we'll talk again. Kelly, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Here's what we do know, though, from overseas. A big step forward, potentially a very significant one, on the path to peace in Ukraine tonight, with the Ukrainian president there agreeing to a short-term ceasefire, 30 days, a ceasefire negotiated by the United States to take place immediately. But there's a catch. Russia would have to accept this plan. So where is Russia on that? TBD. Here's what we know, that if this goes through, the U.S. would immediately lift that pause on intelligence sharing with Ukraine and will resume assistance like weapons and aid, et cetera. But there are no security guarantees for Ukraine. Remember, that was a major sticking point with President Volodymyr Zelensky when he was here in Washington at the Oval Office in that blow-up meeting 10 days ago. Keir Simmons is joining us now from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, where those negotiations are taking place. This all hinges on Moscow. How's the U.S. going to sell it to the Kremlin?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But it also, Hallie, hinges on the Trump administration and its ability to negotiate with the Kremlin. Just listening to your conversation there with Kelly a moment ago, doesn't it feel like every story these days is about President Trump? But this story is about President Trump because no matter what you think of it, it's a big headline, right? We didn't expect this result. And now tonight, we're bringing you the news that the Ukrainians have agreed to a 30-day ceasefire as long as the Russians agree to it too, and Secretary Rubio coming out and explaining it a little to journalists who've been waiting all day for that news. Take a listen.
We'll take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball's now in their court.
Now, I mean, the question is, though, of course, what will the Russians do? Now, President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, heading to Moscow. He had a 3.5-hour meeting with President Putin, last month. So is he going to be able to negotiate with Putin, former KGB man, has led his country for 20 years? This is not Putin's first rodeo.
Give us the landscape looking forward, right? Because one of the things that Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, has argued, and he did in that Oval Office meeting, is that the Kremlin is not a totally reliable partner here, that the Kremlin has broken ceasefire agreements in the past. So if this one moves forward, and again, short term, 30 days, who polices it? Who decides if it's intact or not?
Yeah, there are so many questions. Those are some good ones, as well as that. How do you rebuild Ukraine? What does it look like if there is a violation of the ceasefire? Who decides that? How does it not descend into accusations by both sides? Who gets to keep what territory? Do we just freeze the line of assault, the contact line, or do the Russians, which is what the Russians have been demanding, get more territory? What happens to the area in Kursk that is Russian but is currently being held by the Ukraine? It just goes on and on and on, honestly, and that's a crucial point because, OK, we've got a 30-day ceasefire. Sorry to sound cynical, but there's a lot to figure out here. Yeah. And again,
Day 31,
with the Russians, the question is, another one, exactly. So, with the Russians, you are dealing with wily operators, negotiators, but also another point, because the spotlight is on them, they think they're winning right now. They think they're pushing Ukrainians out of that area of Kursk that Ukraine's been holding. So why is it in their interest to agree to a ceasefire? We don't know how they're going to tackle this, but we've been told again and again today by the Kremlin spokesman, they intend to lean into what they describe as Russia's security interests.
Keir Simmons live for us there, where it is all happening in Saudi Arabia. Keir, we're glad to have you there. Thank you very much for joining us live. We appreciate it. Back here at home, the Transportation Secretary says he will take up an urgent call from investigators looking into that deadly January plane crash over the Potomac to permanently ban almost all helicopters from using a pretty heavily used route through D.C. Take a listen to how the chair of the NTSB framed the danger posed by helicopter traffic around Reagan Airport just tonight.
The existing separation distances between helicopter traffic operating on Route 4 and aircraft landing on runway 33 are insufficient and pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety by increasing the chances of a mid-air collision at DCA.
Remember, everybody on board, both the plane and that Black Hawk helicopter, were killed when the American Airlines jet and the helicopter collided. Both ended up in the Potomac. 67 people in all were killed. You see their names and their faces here. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin is following this for us. Okay, so in super plain English here, the Transportation Secretary basically says, yes, they're going to make the changes that the NTSB wants here, and they're asking for that because what happened in January, that horrific nightmare of a plane crash, they say was part of a broader pattern of concerning things that were happening near Reagan, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamidi seemed to be saying, citing some really disturbing statistics. Let me pull up a full screen here to show you some of the numbers she walked us through in that press conference, saying that from October 2021 to December 2024, there were 15,214 close proximity events between commercial planes and helicopters, 85 events with less than 200 feet of vertical separation. That is extremely close. Hamidi in that press briefing making the point that that data has been there for the FAA to act on all along, and yet that didn't happen, which is why she's making this urgent recommendation today, a point that was echoed by the Transportation Secretary during his own briefing. Take a listen.
Does it piss me off? Yes. And that's an appropriate word maybe for a secretary to use, but of course, that the data was there. It wasn't effectively analyzed. To see that we had this kind of risk at DCA makes me angry.
Secretary Duffy in his briefing saying that he's going to keep in place that suspension of helicopter traffic that was announced in the wake of this tragedy, with the exception of, say, presidential travel, emergency travel. And he also talked about how he wants AI to implement artificial intelligence systems to be able to analyze and go through data, not just there at DCA, but at airports across the country to try and identify a similar hotspot so that this tragedy doesn't happen again. Hallie.
And just a quick question here before we move on here, but I think one of the things that people were watching for out of this news conference today, which was, significant, was any word about the cause of the crash, like an official determination of sort of who was at fault, what happened here, et cetera, et cetera. The NTSB did not go that far today, right? What's the timeline on something like that?
I mean, we're talking months here, Hallie. They said that there's a long way to go in the investigation. They're still trying to determine if there was an issue with the Blackhawks altimeter. Could that be the reason why the pilots were flying above that 200 feet mark, which is would be against regulations? Could that be the reason why? All of that still on the table, but the problem is that the Black Hawk, the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder are one. They didn't record critical information such as time, position, and date, so they're still piecing all of that together. That could take a while.
Aaron McLaughlin, thank you very much for that. Also tonight, new surveillance footage is coming into us showing what may be some of the final moments of a missing University of Pittsburgh student who was last seen in the Dominican Republic. Take a look at this video here. Police in the DR tell NBC News that is Sadiqa Kanaki at the back of the group, wearing what looks like a white dress. We've spotlit her here. She's got her arm around one of the friends she was traveling with, who you see there wearing a tank top. Police say the group was headed toward the beach area of the resort where they were staying, right around 4 in the morning on Thursday. They say her friends came back to the hotel, but the 20-year-old did not. Officers are now re-interviewing friends and workers at the resort as crews are on the ground looking for her using helicopters, drones, divers. I mean, you see some of it there, that chopper that is scanning the beach. Priya Shrithar is following this story for us. Still so many questions here, even days later, but also a lot of new details about where the investigation is headed. Our colleague Jesse Kirsch is on the ground there. What has he learned so far? What are police telling us?
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. Well, a few things that authorities want to make very clear. Number one, they don't know at this point whether or not this was potentially a tragic accident or if foul play was part of the scenario. They also don't know, by the way, whether or not Sadiqa Kanaki is dead or alive. Of course, as you mentioned, this is the last surveillance video where she was detected. It was at around 4:15 in the morning on Thursday. And so now authorities in the Dominican Republic are combing through this surveillance video. As you mentioned, they're re-interviewing the 5 friends that she traveled to the Dominican Republic with. They were all scheduled to return to the United States on Friday, but of course they have all stayed behind to assist in the investigation. Now, the Dominican Republic National Police actually stayed on the beach overnight to see in which direction potentially a body would drift if in fact this was an accident and she perhaps somehow fell into the ocean. They also are saying that at this point, there are no indications of any blood on the beach or signs of aggression. And I also want to mention that her friends actually didn't notice that she was actually missing until 4 p.m. the following day. So about 12 hours after that surveillance video that you were just watching there. And that's because they went on an excursion that day. And I also want to emphasize that this is an investigation that's involving American authorities, Dominican Republic authorities, and then also folks from the Indian embassy in the Dominican Republic. And that's because Sudhisha Kananki is actually, her national origin is from India, but she is a permanent resident here in the United States. So her family actually filed a missing persons report with the Loudoun County Sheriff's Department in Virginia because that's where she's originally from. They're going through the cell phones of the girls to try to see if they might be able to get any clues there. But as you know, Hallie, whenever it comes to any of these missing people investigations, time is of the essence. And as of right now, 5 entire days have gone by since she's been seen. Hallie?
Priya Sridhar, just a nightmare for her family and for many others. Priya, thank you very much. To the world of business now, especially of interest to anybody who flies anywhere. Because for years, right, you've heard the commercials from Southwest. Watch.
These bags right here, they fly free.
Bags have it made. Except on other airlines, where they charge you up to $120 round trip.
We think bag fees are a joke. Perfect for April Fools.
2 bags fly free. That's a big flex.
A big flex. They said it, right? That's Southwest's big thing. Used to be. But now we're learning starting in May, there's going to be a catch. Only some bags fly free because Southwest plans to get rid of its 2 bags, no charge program for most customers. The airline's been under a lot of pressure from one of its investors to make some serious changes as it's gotten bigger over the years, too. It's been struggling to keep its costs down and its revenue up. But this change and a few others that Southwest is making, they're kind of a gamble, right? Because things like free bags help set Southwest apart from competitors. Southwest has more passengers than any other American airline. It's been #1 in North America in the traveler rankings for 3 years. People like it. Will they like this? That's a question mark. And it's all happening against the backdrop of what's expected to be less travel overall in this country, with Delta and American also cutting first quarter forecasts because of economic weakness and uncertainty. Leslie Josephs is joining us now. Leslie, 2 bags fly free. That is a registered trademark on Southwest's site, right? I mean, this policy change is a big deal and just one of several changes Southwest is making. Explain that. Explain why.
That is a very big deal. I've gotten a lot of reader mail today. So Southwest, for the more than 50 years that it's been flying, has been offering 2 bags fly free. And over the years, over the decades, we've seen every other American airline start charging for bags. And over time, they keep increasing the bag fees. But Southwest was the holdout. And what we've heard from Southwest executives, what we've heard from customers for years, is that the reason that they fly Southwest, the #1 reason, or one of the top reasons, is because of the 2 bags flying free. And now that's changing. They pretty much just caved to the pressure.
Delta, the competitors are noticing this. The head of Delta said today at this conference that this is an opportunity, basically saying customers are up for grabs now. Meaning there is this question of whether this may give Southwest some short-term wins financially here, but are they long-term risking some brand identity here?
They are taking a really big gamble. I mean, this is such a major part of Southwest's policy, along with open seating, something else that they're going to do away with, something they announced last year. They're going to have assigned seats. You know, we all know the cattle call boarding, love it or hate it. That's going away for assigned seats, extra legroom seats, and things like the more, fuller service airlines like American and Delta and United. So Southwest has previously said, we could get billions of dollars from bags, but we are risking losing market share. So it remains to be seen whether this actually does pay off for them. But there is more than $5 billion airlines have brought in bag fees just for most of 2024, not even the full year.
And you can see their expected gains and losses from that bag fee change there. Leslie Josephs, always great to have you on to break it down. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Over on Capitol Hill, any minute the House is going to try to keep the government up and running past a Friday deadline. You're getting a live look at the House floor here. But even if Republicans hang together and this vote squeaks through, there's still going to be this whole will they, won't they game of government shutdown with a looming vote in the Senate that really could go either way. NBC's Sahil Kapoor is up on Capitol Hill for us. There was a time, maybe in the golden days, Sahil, where the question of, like, would the government be able to, baseline function wasn't a question every 6 months to a year. It is a question tonight. Is this vote going to pass? Like, where does it stand? And then is the Senate going to pass it?
Hallie, I could not hear the end of it. My phone is just dead. I don't know if you can hear me, but
all good. Yep.
I'm going to try to answer this anyway. The vote series in the House is just about to begin. This is going to be the third vote in the series, and Speaker Mike Johnson and his House Republican leadership team is projecting heavy confidence that this thing will pass. They only have a one-vote margin if everyone is in attendance. It's possible that one Democrat will be absent based on how things have gone so far today, in which case they'd have a two-vote margin. But right now, only Congressman Tom Massey, the Kentucky Republican, is clearly against this. There are a couple of others on the fence. Let's take a look at some of those names there. Congressman Tim Burchett, he is probably the biggest one to watch. He is a staunch fiscal conservative. I spoke to him as he walked off the floor earlier today. Does not like the fact that this increases military spending. He called them war pimps at the Pentagon. That's his term, who he doesn't want to get more money. The others are typically known as team players, and I would be surprised if any of them ultimately vote against this bill. So other than Tom Massey, House Republican leaders think they have everyone else on board, and if that remains, they won't need any Democrats. We are watching for some possible Democrats to move across the aisle, but we're not certain any of them will. Beyond that, there are a litany of Democratic objections. The reason that the leadership has trashed this bill. Let's start with the fact that Democrats weren't even at the table to negotiate it. This was a package negotiated between House Republican leaders and the White House with their input. They don't like the fact that it has cuts to non-military spending. They don't like the fact that it does not impose any guardrails on President Trump, as well as Elon Musk and the DOGE effort to unilaterally cut or freeze spending that is ultimately the prerogative of Congress, they say, and a host of other cuts, including significant funding reduction to the District of Columbia that they say could have a real detrimental impact to this city. Nevertheless, if it does pass, there will only be a couple of days in the Senate for them to get it through, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune indicated that he is going to try to get this through the Senate and pass quickly. Let's take a listen to what Thune said.
My view is that the best way to fund the government and to deal with last year's business so we can move on to this year's business is to fund this, or to vote for this CR. And I'm hoping that we'll have the requisite number of Democrats in order to do that. And I think anything else they put out there is a smokescreen.
And Hallie, this will take 60 votes in the Senate. That means at least 8 Democrats, given that Senator Rand Paul is a hard no. Democrats emerged from their lunch meeting without a consensus as to how to move forward. The Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, saying only they're going to wait to see what the House does before they decide.
Sahil Kapoor live for us there on the Hill. Sahil, thank you very much. We'll see what happens. We'll check back in with you if that vote closes anytime soon. Coming up, the president kind of giving game show hosts with what looked like kind of an ad at the White House, an ad for Tesla, why he is all in and which one he says he's picked for himself. Plus, 2 new measles cases in another state tied to that outbreak emanating from Texas. What health officials are saying tonight when we come back. So with President Trump's tariffs threatening to boost the price of new cars by as much as $12,000, according to experts, the president now appears to be in the market for a new car of his own. And surprising no one, it's apparently going to be a Tesla, with the South Lawn turning into a showcase as Elon Musk joins his friend and confidant for, a photo op. I think that's fair to say. Happening as Tesla gets hammered in the markets and at some dealerships. And the president saying he wants to label people who attack Teslas as domestic terrorists.
When you heard an American company, especially a company like this, supplies so many jobs that others are unable to do, when you do that, those people are going to go through a big problem when we catch them. And we have we got a lot of cameras up. We already know who some of them are. We're going to catch them. And they're bad guys.
To be clear, you are legally allowed to protest against whatever company you want, even run by arguably the world's second most powerful man. You can't do this, right? You can't go and set a Cybertruck you don't own on fire like we saw in Seattle. You can see it in the daylight here. It's torched. That's not legal. a boycott would be. And as we reported on this show, those Tesla boycotts seem to be growing from coast to coast. I want to bring in Vaughn Hilliard, who is joining us now. Let's start. We'll talk about the Musk of it all here, but let's start with that moment on the South Lawn. Clearly intended to be a moment with the White House. You can't just get 5 Teslas in there, you know what I mean, like, without somebody planning for that. Like, that takes a bit of intentionality here. And I have to wonder, are other car companies not a little ticked off about it?
You know, I think it's interesting because, look, President Trump is going to be meeting with more than 100 CEOs here this afternoon that are part of this group called the Business Roundtable. Top corporation CEOs, including the likes of Mary Barra, who is exactly Mary Barra, the head of GM, is one of those CEOs on the board. And she was watching those images just like we all were. This is not normal. Let's be very clear, Hallie. This is unprecedented to see a product from a private company be touted in such a way by the President of the United States. A Getty image that was taken of the president, a piece of paper that he was holding, essentially was a sales pitch listing off the sale price and the great qualities that make a Tesla vehicle. And the President of the United States read those off and got in the car there with Elon Musk, who, we should be very clear, dating back to mid-December during that transition when Elon Musk's role after donating more than $250 million to his campaign. When in the transition, we have seen over the last 3 months, the stock price of Tesla, Hallie, dropped by more than 50%. This was clearly a favor to his friend and governmental ally, Elon Musk, to try to boost the sales of Tesla at a time that has been very difficult for this company, in large part because of his political calculations.
Listen, I mean, the president has put products on the South Lawn before. He did it in his first term. But you talk about Elon Musk here, and there is maybe a question of how much this was also, as you say, intended to be a show of support, not just with what Tesla has gone through, and you talk about the stock price, et cetera, but also after some of the reporting, including from our team, about concern, perhaps, among some parts of the administration over just how involved Musk is and Doge is on almost everything.
And to what extent are decisions being made at very high levels that are meant to directly influence Elon Musk's own private companies? Of course, Starlink, right, found its way in the middle of a debate between Secretary Marco Rubio and the Polish foreign minister over the extent to which Starlink is effectively being able to be used in Ukraine's defenses against Russian aggression. And Elon Musk effectively threatening to shut off Starlink and using his own company as wielding power at a time in which the White House is in the middle of intense peace negotiations, not only in Russia and Ukraine here, but also in the Middle East. And I think that is where watching him out on the South Lawn today with the president is notable, because we've heard just last week there was some a fight between a clash between Secretary Marco Rubio and as well as Secretary Sean Duffy of the Department of Transportation over who was actually making the decisions in their departments on who to fire and who not. And there is some concern about Elon Musk and the extent to which he's able to wield his power and influence in the White House. And clearly, yet again, President Trump standing there in defense of his friend and special government employee, Elon Musk.
Vaughn Hilliard, thank you very much outside the White House for that for us tonight. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, police now arresting the captain of a container ship on suspicion of manslaughter after that collision off the coast of England we told you about last night. Remember, that ship hit an American fuel tanker. Both ships then caught on fire. Police say they have ended the search for the missing crew member and are still speaking with everyone involved. Number 2, the legal team for the Columbia grad arrested by ICE over the weekend says he will not be at tomorrow's court hearing. We're talking about Mahmoud Khalil after a judge blocked his deportation when ICE agents said his student visa was getting revoked. Khalil's attorney says he is a legal permanent resident with a green card. Khalil, of course, involved with organizing some of those protests at Columbia. Number 3, a DOJ official says she was fired for refusing to restore Mel Gibson's gun rights. Gibson, a supporter of President Trump's, lost those rights after a domestic violence misdemeanor conviction back in 2011. In a statement to NBC News, Elizabeth Oyer said people in the DOJ are, in her words, afraid to voice their opinions because dissent is being punished. A Justice Department official denies the allegations. Number 4, Billy Joel's postponing his upcoming tour because of a medical condition. That's what he posted on Instagram, that he needs to take about 4 months off to recover from surgery and do some physical therapy. Fortunately, for Billy Joel fans, he's expected to make a full recovery. Number 5, have you heard about this? New Texas Rangers hats getting pulled from the team's online store. It's according to the Dallas Morning News, because the latest design apparently featured a vulgar Spanish word, which is why we're not showing it to you. But it says, you know, Texas, but in the middle they put the T for Texas Rangers, so it looks like a bad word in Spanish. MLB officials declined to comment. Rangers officials apparently were not aware of the design before it was released. When we come back, polls closing soon in an election that you might not care about other years, but you probably will this year. We're watching Greenland tonight. We've got that after the break. Plus, the major trial over the death of one of the world's biggest sports stars. What we're learning about the case against soccer legend Diego Maradona's medical team. Voters in Greenland heading to the polls today. And if you're about to mute me because you don't care at all about voters in Greenland heading to the polls today, hang on. Because you know the backdrop to this. President Trump aggressively setting his sights on making Greenland part of America.
I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
All of it happening alongside growing calls from politicians for the island to declare independence from Denmark. Danielle Hamamjian is joining us now. And this Greenland thing, it's become this sort of buzzword ever since the president took office and started suggesting that Greenland should become America's, as he put it there, one way or the other. It goes with his calls to take back the Panama Canal. It goes sort of under the same umbrella as his push to make Canada the 51st state, et cetera. What is up with Greenland?
71.
First of all, that no other election in Greenland's history has ever garnered this much attention. Why does Donald Trump care so much about Greenland? Because there's a lot of money to be made there. This is a place that is rich in rare earth minerals, things like lithium, copper, nickel, things that you need to make wind turbines, electric vehicles, batteries. The Greenland is known to have 43 out of the 50 minerals deemed critical by the U.S. government. However, this place has a harsh climate, Hallie, and 80% of Greenland, of course, is covered in ice. The thinking, however, is as that ice melts, it would open shipping routes. It would make it easier to access the mines, to drill for oil. It is also, as you know, a place that has a U.S. military base. The DoD has its northernmost installation there in Greenland, which is essential for its ballistic missile system. And it is so close to Russia, of course, so in the eyes of the U.S. government, it is a critical location.
Okay, but the Danish prime minister says they're not going to give Greenland to the U.S. A Danish newspaper shows people in Greenland do not want to be taken over by the U.S. So President Trump is the driving force here. But if, you know, Denmark says no and Greenland says no, what is the other option?
Well, so Denmark is behind everything. When it comes to defense and foreign policy, Denmark calls the shots. When it comes to the annual budget, Denmark is behind half of it. However, today when people were going to the polls, yes, they were thinking about health care and cost of living, just like any other election in the world. But so many people were talking about the independence movement and this break from Denmark. Those comments you heard from Donald Trump, people were disgusted by those comments, and it has galvanized the independence movement because they see that now there is global attention on this election. We're talking about it. We wouldn't have been talking about it in previous years. And so most parties are in favor of independence. They only disagree on the timeline and how quickly they should do it.
Danielle Hamamjian, thank you very much for that reality check. Appreciate it. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Midwest Bureau, Michigan's Attorney General charging 4 people after a 5-year-old boy was killed in a hyperbaric chamber explosion. The court entered not guilty pleas on their behalf. Their attorneys either declined to comment or could not be reached immediately. The state's Attorney General says the center where it happened puts profits over client safety. That's the allegation. An attorney for the center did not immediately respond. Out of our Southeast Bureau, Oklahoma reporting its first 2 cases of measles. Health officials there say the people involved had been exposed to the outbreak in Texas and New Mexico, meaning there's now more than 280 cases of measles all across the country. And out of our Northeast Bureau, organizers are making a few changes to Boston's St. Paddy's Day parade this year, like starting it earlier by about 90 minutes. Officials say that's to keep everyone safe after arrests for bad behavior last year. Also tonight, a huge trial is beginning over the death of a soccer legend as people in Argentina literally take to the streets to demand justice. They're out there calling for justice, pointing the finger at the doctors of Diego Maradona, who is just hugely, massively famous in that country. Think Messi before Messi, right? Maradona brought home the World Cup in 1986. He's just a major source of national pride there. Well, now 7 medical staffers are facing up to 25 years behind bars, accused of negligence and manslaughter after Maradona went into cardiac arrest at home in Buenos Aires in 2020. They have all denied wrongdoing. Priscilla Thompson is joining us now. And Priscilla, for the very beginning of this trial, day 1 today, Maradona's family was in the courtroom in tears at points, right?
Yeah, a very emotional day, Hallie, for his family, including his daughters and also his ex-partner, all who were in the courtroom as these 7 healthcare professionals were preparing to stand trial or beginning to stand trial today. And they include a neurosurgeon and a psychiatrist. As you noted, he was at home recovering from brain surgery due to a blood clot in 2020 when he suffered cardiac arrest and ultimately died. And of course, now we are seeing this trial go to fruition. And just to explain to you the charges, they are, quote, homicide with possible intent. And so, according to the AP, he was under the care of these doctors at a home, and they pushed for him to be treated at home when in fact, he may have been better served inside a hospital facility. But important to note that all 7 of these defendants have pled not guilty. Hallie?
Maradona openly struggled with drug addiction both during and after his soccer career. How might the defense highlight that?
Yeah, for decades, this is something that he talked about publicly, the struggles with cocaine and alcohol addiction. We know that even during his storied career, it led to 2 very long expulsions from games where he wasn't allowed to play, and even a time period where he experienced a high-profile drug bust off of the field. But it's unclear to what extent the defense is really going to bring this up and make this a part of the case. Obviously, we know doctors have talked about how cocaine use can impact people's health and particularly the heart. But ultimately, it's going to be up to this 3-judge panel to decide to what extent that played a role in this case, if and when the defense brings it up, and whether or not these doctors hold any accountability. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, thank you very much for that, one that Argentina and the world is watching. Coming up, we are checking back in with one patient about living with long COVID 5 years to the day after the pandemic officially started. That's next. To tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight, it's the somber commemoration of 5 years to the day since COVID officially became a worldwide pandemic. You probably remember where you were when Tom Hanks announced he had it. Remember March 11th? When that NBA game paused right before tip-off because of it. When President Trump delivered that Oval Office address that same night. COVID's not exactly a thing of the past, but a lot has changed since then, especially for the millions of Americans living with the ongoing symptoms of long COVID. Here's Dr. John Torres.
Empty streets, hospitals overwhelmed, uncertainty and fear. 5 years since life came to a standstill, COVID declared a pandemic and a national emergency.
The coronavirus outbreak declared a global pandemic.
But for Shamir Sweeney, it still feels kind of like the first day.
Medical professionals at those hospitals in Baltimore were telling me, you know what, just give it 2 weeks and you'll be fine. My 2 weeks never came.
While the pandemic has faded into the background for many of us, Shamir Sweeney is one of millions of Americans the CDC says is dealing with long COVID, having symptoms that linger long after getting infected.
I stopped being able to walk. without any type of assistance. Migraines, blurry vision.
Sweeney got COVID in March of 2020. She was an English teacher in Baltimore when the pandemic hit. Still, she deals with a slew of symptoms like brain fog, body pain, and memory loss, and has a pile of pills to manage them.
This is my acid reflux medication.
We've spoken with Sweeney several times over the years about her condition.
It's hard for me to walk. I actually just was approved for disability. There are times when I still sit and cry.
And now?
5 years later, I can't remember my healthy body. I can't remember my healthy mind.
Dr. Mark Sala, co-director of Northwestern's Comprehensive COVID-19 Center, says doctors have several hypotheses for what causes long COVID, but still don't fully understand who's most at risk for it.
I see plenty of folks who have, for all we know, a good immune system, have been vaccinated, and have done everything well from that standpoint to protect themselves, and will still come in with 6 months of fatigue.
Do COVID vaccines protect you in any way against developing long COVID?
Vaccines prevent against severity of infection, and severity of infection is well linked to having bad consequences from COVID infection.
And answers may be getting further out of reach, with President Trump cutting the Long COVID Advisory Committee last month to get rid of what he called unnecessary parts of the federal bureaucracy. Long COVID patients like Sweeney say it's a blow. She's also worried about losing government disability support, saying working an in-person job is out of reach.
There are days that I can't even get out of the bed.
Researchers at Harvard estimate long COVID has cost the economy over $3 trillion between reduced earnings, increased medical spending, and lost quality of life. Even though Sweeney can't return to the classroom, she's now teaching in a new way, founding the Black Long COVID Experience and sharing resources with others.
That's my goal, to galvanize more Black people.
So as Sweeney slogs through the symptoms, she knows she's not alone.
Dr. John Torres is joining us now. So, Dr. John, if people do, I mean, you talk about it there, she knows she's not alone. If others have these lingering long COVID symptoms, what are they supposed to do? I assume be in touch with their doctors?
Exactly, Hallie. And the first thing is to realize it could be long COVID because these symptoms could be subtle. But the definition is if you have some of these symptoms 3 months after having COVID, then it could be long COVID. And we're talking fatigue, brain fog, muscle aches, lack of sleep or not ability to get to sleep. If you're having those kinds of symptoms and they simply linger and don't seem to go away, definitely talk to your doctor. There are things that can be done. We have no treatments right now. We have no cures for it, but we're certainly making some headway. And we want to make sure people are taken care of, especially their mental health, because it can take a toll on that as well, Hallie.
Dr. John Torres, thank you very much. Still to come here on the show, one of the most popular Democrats in the country making a move back in a big way. What Michelle Obama and her brother are apparently saying about things like the divorce process and post-White House life. That's next. One of the most popular Democrats in the country and one of the more low-profile Democrats ever since President Trump's election win is stepping back into the spotlight in a big way. First Lady Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, tomorrow launching a new podcast with her brother, Craig Robinson, in which both of them apparently get vulnerable on some tricky stuff.
We are so excited for you to listen to our brand new podcast. It's called IMO with Michelle Obama and Craig Robinson. Together, Craig and I are going to take your questions about the challenges you're grappling with in life.
IMO, like in my opinion. The former First Lady reportedly talks about what her life is like now, like how after years of Secret Service protection, she started driving again. It's just the latest in the Obama's growing media portfolio. The couple signed that big Netflix deal a few years ago, even expanding their partnership now to create more content. Chloe Malas is joining us now. And Chloe, talk through this sort of new venture, because it is a splashy debut, or at least, of course, Michelle Obama hopes that that is what it will be. coming out tomorrow with the podcast. I think they're going to South by Southwest the day after that. And really framing this as both of them opening up about some of the more vulnerable moments.
So I think that this is really an interesting choice. She's going to be doing this podcast with her brother. The first episode, which the New York Times has listened to, they've actually listened to the first two. It's about her and her brother talking about growing up together in Chicago, sharing a bedroom together, living in this tiny little apartment, and they're going to tackle all sorts of relationship issues. They're going to be talking about her brother's divorce. They're going to talk about adult friendships. They have Issa Rae on the second episode. And this is really in line with what Michelle Obama has been doing since leaving the White House. She and former President Barack Obama, they launched Higher Ground, a really successful production company where they've had all sorts of TV shows and films. They've had Becoming, they've had Fatherhood, Our Ocean, Starting 5, American Symphony. The list goes on and on. Even a show about dating later in life, which I stumbled upon recently and absolutely loved. And they are also, Hallie, going to have a lot of guests, from Seth Rogen to Jay Shetty, Tyler Perry. So obviously Michelle Obama is going to be leaning into her celebrity connections. But one thing you're not going to be hearing about, though, is politics. She said it in her memoir, and she has said it again. She is not going to be talking about politics.
You know, there's a lot of Democrats who, prior to November had hoped she would talk about politics, right? Because she remains one of the more popular figures inside the Democratic Party, but has not been super public on the scene in the last couple of months, Chloe.
I mean, look, as we know, President Trump had said that he thought that perhaps Michelle Obama might run for president. And so you might wonder if he will be listening in to these episodes. What I think is going to be interesting is that it's not just the podcast. There is the visual component to it, which is more popular with podcasts these days. So we're going to actually get to see video of Michelle and these guests. And it's going to be really exciting to see how this does. But so far, everything that Michelle Obama has done since leaving the White House, she's had that Midas touch, Hallie.
Chloe Malas, thank you very much for that. We'll see when it all drops tomorrow. Appreciate it. That's a wrap for this hour. More coverage picks up right now. We are coming on the air tonight with the uncertainty and with the unpredictability over tariffs, maybe moving markets closer to a correction, with big swings in stock prices today as the U.S. and Canada escalate that tariff fight, but then also maybe kind of back off it a little bit, but then also maybe not. We're going to break down what you need to know when we take you live to the White House, where big business leaders are sitting down with the president as we speak. Also, just into us, some of the new security concerns, apparently, at the Department of Education here in Washington, why it's shutting its doors temporarily this hour. Plus, another market mover, the war in Ukraine, and new word of a short-term ceasefire that Ukraine has agreed to. But will Russia? We're live in Saudi Arabia, where that deal's getting hammered out. Then some new restrictions, potentially, around Reagan National Airport after the deadliest plane crash in more than a decade. And the new surveillance video we're just getting into us that may give investigators some clues into the final moments before a University of Pittsburgh student went missing in the DR. And why bags no longer fly free on Southwest for some people. The end of one of the most memorable perks of any airline in America, coming up later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and right now President Trump is sitting down with the CEOs of some of America's biggest companies, many of which have seen their stocks tank recently as President Trump leans into tariffs and a trade war. And in just the last couple of minutes, we're getting a little snippet of the president's message to all of them, which is basically that tariffs are not going anywhere. Watch.
The tariffs are having a tremendously positive impact. They will have, and they are having.
He's in front of leaders from GM, Apple, Home Depot, JP Morgan Chase. You see it there. Citibank, Walmart, United, FedEx, etc. They are all there right now with the president. And what do they all have in common besides their attendance? All of their company stocks in the red since Inauguration Day. And the markets as a whole have their own whiplash going on today for a couple of reasons. First, that reported peace deal in Ukraine. More on that in a bit. But there's also hints that the president's crash out with Canada may be turning a corner. The Ontario premier, Doug Ford, says he's going to meet with the Commerce Secretary in Washington later this week. But you know how the president needles Canada a lot, calling it a 51st state? Our team sources say he's pretty serious about it. All of it leading to questions about what could be next. We're going to start with Brian Chung, who is live from the New York Stock Exchange for us tonight. And Brian, in literally the last 25 minutes or so, we are hearing the president defend these tariffs to these CEOs to their faces, right? Some business leaders have suggested that prices will have to go up for customers because of these tariffs. Others have said they would reinvest into America because of this. What do they want to hear from the president?
Yeah, well, I think what they want to hear from the president is just more certainty about what the policy is going to be. I think that even in some industries and certain specific companies, they might not even oppose the tariffs. They just don't like the implementation of it, where it seems like on any given day, any given hour, you don't know if there's going to be a tariff that's slapped on, and then you don't know if there's going to be a retaliatory tariff from another country that's then slapped on, and then the ratcheting up of the rates and then ratcheting down the rates. Just today, we have seen so many flip-flops in terms of what has happened with those steel and aluminum tariffs that you can understand why some of these business leaders are saying, you know what, how could I project what my future cash flows are going to be, not just in the next year, but in this quarter alone? We heard from the likes of Delta Airlines, American Airlines, Kohl's, all guiding on an uncertain outlook and actually revising their outlook down because they're worried about this spilling over to consumer activity as well. If Wall Street doesn't even know what's going on, how can Main Street know what's going on? If consumers start to pull back on spending, the consumer, which accounts for about 70% of U.S. economic activity, that could be a self-fulfilling prophecy for a recession. That's the link between what's happening here on Wall Street and the recession possibility.
So we talked sort of macro and micro here. And when we look at Canada, right, this potential tit for tat sounds like maybe that's kind of cooling off a little bit here. Do we get any sense? I mean, you talk about the most important thing for the markets and for business leaders, which is certainty. Not a ton of that at this moment. But what about the big picture on the economy?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, big picture on the economy, because what Wall Street does isn't necessarily linked to what the economy is doing. But we are not in a recession right now. The unemployment rate is at 4.1% as of the last read that we got just on Friday. That was, by the way, the first report covering the first month of the Trump administration. And we didn't see any sort of massive uptick. 4.1%, by the way, is near multi-decade lows and is in line with what we saw in the final few months of the Biden administration. But again, what you're seeing are these concerns about a possible recession later on down the line as a result of the uncertainty from the tariffs. And I was spending all day here in the New York Stock Exchange talking to traders, some of which are bullish, and they've been saying, look, I think this volatility that's happening right now is probably going to be around for a little while because we haven't seen any signs from the Trump administration of an abating of this tariff rhetoric, even though, yes, we did see some kind of flip-flop today. But you kind of look at the micro action among, like, say, for example, the Dow and the S&P 500. We actually came off of some of the session lows when the announcement happened that the Canadian side of things and the Ontario Premier, Doug Ford, was going to step back from the 25% surcharge that he was going to levy on Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. That was when it coincided with the stock market bouncing back. So again, that's kind of in line with the story here on Wall Street. But again, those recession fears are something that are very much out there.
Brian Chung, thank you very much for that. I want to bring in now our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander, not at the White House. He is in New York tonight, of course, on assignment after anchoring the Today Show this morning. Okay, Peter, as you're juggling 19 jobs and 19 stories, let me start with tariffs and pick up where Brian left off, because there is no way that these CEOs like seeing their companies in the red, as we noted here. Right. Behind the scenes, what are you hearing from your sources about any maybe consternation that may be happening inside the administration about where the economy may be headed?
Well, it's clear that President Trump himself is not backing down as it relates to these tariffs, but privately he is hearing some pushback from some House Republicans, including from some within his own administration, have some anxieties about the tariffs right now, particularly the president, who saw this just dramatic drop in the markets over the course of the last several days following his acknowledgement that a recession was possible just a few days ago, was asked the same question earlier today, and the president said, no, he doesn't think that'll happen at all. He says he believes there will be a boom. Does that have an impact? We wait to see right now. But Hallie, what's striking to me is this morning began with the president threatening to double tariffs on steel and aluminum on Canadian imports, what the U.S. receives from Canada. That was following the retaliation for Canada saying it was going to put a surcharge on electricity that it sent to 3 U.S. states, Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. After a lot of back and forth, the market's tanking, losing about 500 points. It looks like Canada's backing down and the president is backing down as well. So all that we have to show for it is the markets that remain confused. They lost a lot of money and we're back right where we started, Hallie. So there is some real frustration, certainly including among those business leaders who were face-to-face with the president tonight.
Can I ask you about another story, Peter, separately, that I know that you and our team have been working on and reporting out here, and that relates to the president's longtime pledge on the campaign trail to basically, make huge changes to the Department of Education, get rid of it altogether. There is word tonight about some kind of perhaps, and I want to be careful here, security concern, temporarily shutting the doors of the DOE. What do we know?
So I wouldn't frame this as security concerns, though that language was, it appears, used in a message that was sent out to some of these employees. Here's what we do know. The Department of Education, according to a White House official, is going to be sending home all of its civil servants home. They're going to go home tonight. They're not coming back to work tomorrow. They're
as
taking
of
their
like
laptops.
7 minutes ago, right? Just to be clear.
Just a moment. I mean, this happened within the last couple of hours. We've confirmed it from the White House within the last few minutes. They are all going home. They will not be at the office tomorrow. 1,300 of them are going to receive termination letters tomorrow. They're going to be told that they are losing their job. The department has the best number I'm told is about 4,000 to 4,500 employees right now. So that is a significant chunk. The president has said he wants to get rid of the department altogether. Obviously, he can't do that. He said it in his first term. He wants to do it this go around. That would require an act of Congress. That's not going to happen. But what he can do, it appears, is try to dismantle it, getting rid of so many of the jobs that exist there. And ultimately, the question is going to be whether his desire to have this money go to the states for them to run their own educational operations is going to create a very different way this country runs its educational programs right now. The impact on grants, on school systems, particularly in places, rural parts of America, Alabama, Mississippi, and places like that rely heavily on the federal money to make a difference in the education and the lives of young people.
Peter Alexander, with that breaking news, as you say, Peter, in just the last couple of minutes, last couple of hours here. Peter, great to have you, our chief White House correspondent, as always. Good to see you, friend.
Thanks,
Thank you. Let me bring in our education correspondent, Rahima Ellis, who is joining us now as well. Peter mentioned, and again, I want to speak in broad terms here, with the president having pledged to essentially gut the Department of Education. One of the big questions has been what happens to those federal student loans? That is a big question for many, many Americans, and just one of many questions that we don't necessarily have a definitive answer to right now, right?
That's absolutely correct. There are some who say that the jobs that are done under the Department of Education might be marshaled into other departments, such as those services that go for children who have special needs. Maybe it goes to the Department of Health and Human Services. When there's some issues around civil rights within schools, maybe that would go to the Justice Department. But there's so many things that are occurring here. The Department of Education is probably one of the, if not the smallest cabinet position within the White House purview and within the federal government. They've got 4,400 workers. It's a budget of $68 billion. But who do they serve? They serve the 50 million public school students across this country. And when we're talking about who is served, let's talk about those children in particular. We're talking about 26 million children in low-income communities who receive services as a result of what's called Title I programs. These are children who are not just in big inner city communities, but they're in small communities, rural communities, all across this country, and many of them in the red spots of this country. Also, we're talking about children who receive services through disabilities for the act that's called Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And we're talking about more than 7.4 million students we're talking about who receive these services. So when you start cutting funds for those kinds of things and you cut workers, then those are some of the workers who oversee these programs to make certain that these children are being managed in terms of the funding that they're getting. And so if you don't have anyone who's overseeing what is happening with those funds, many people I've talked to in the education department are concerned of how are those children going to continue to get their services. That's a huge issue that many people are asking. And then in terms of cutting, as you know, it takes Congress in order to appropriate these funds for these various services that the children are having. And I don't know, Hallie, if you have heard, but I haven't heard any information thus far of Congress chiming in on saying how these funds and these services would continue to be appropriated for children. And Pell Grants, as you talk about those grants that go to colleges, we're talking about more than 6.6 million recipients of Pell Grants across this country. And a lot of kids are applying and looking at colleges that they might want to go to. Right now, we've got a lot of kids on college campuses across this country or in their spring break, and they're doing their college tours to try and figure out where they might go in the fall. And they're also trying to figure out how they're going to pay for it. And many of them will be looking to Pell Grants to make that happen. So this could have an enormous impact on people.
You saw that live look there at the Education Department. Rahima, to be clear, too, and to remind people, School curriculum is not set at the federal level, right? That's something that the states handle.
That is absolutely correct. The federal government does not determine the curriculum, but the federal government does provide of $8 that goes into government. The federal government provides about one of those $8, but it is critical, particularly when you're talking about governments and local governments all across the country that are strapped for funds. The input of federal dollars is very important in helping them to continue providing services for children in need.
Rahema Ellis scrambling for us tonight with that breaking news to a camera. We're glad to see you, Rahema. Thank you for staying on top of it. And I can guarantee we will talk again, I am sure, in the hours and in the days to come. Appreciate that. Also tonight, some developing news from overseas with a big step forward on the path to peace in Ukraine, with the president there agreeing to a 30-day ceasefire negotiated by the U.S. to take place immediately. Now, there is a catch. Russia has to accept the plan still. And will they? Well, we don't know. That's super TBD. Here's what we do know. The United States will immediately lift a pause on intelligence sharing with Ukraine and will pick up security assistance again. That's weapons, that's aid, but there are no security guarantees for Ukraine. Remember, that was a big sticking point for Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, in that blow up of an Oval Office meeting 10 days ago. Keir Simmons is joining us now from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Keir, no security guarantees for Ukraine. Do we know what happened there with Zelensky? Was it a change of heart? Did he see, in some ways, the writing on the wall?
Oh, I think so. After that meeting, disastrous meeting in the Oval Office where he ended up in a clash with President Trump and Vice President Vance, I think he felt in the end that he had no choice, and there would have been pressure on him, not just from the US, but from the Europeans too. And of course, I suppose from the Saudis here as well, in a certain sense. Ultimately, he needed to get at least the intelligence flow back from the US. That was so crucial. That is so crucial. And we're hearing from Ukrainian officials now, Hallie, that it has been switched back on again. So the Trump administration delivering on that offer, that agreement, but really effectively in exchange, President Zelensky and his team have had to agree not to demand the security deal, the security guarantees. The word security guarantees is in the statement, but it's that we don't know what that really means, who's going to do it. We're pretty clear that the Trump administration says it won't be the US. Europeans, are they really capable of it? So Ukraine has always said that it would be vulnerable without these guarantees. Looks a little vulnerable tonight.
Keir Simmons, live for us in Saudi Arabia, where this is all happening. It's all being worked out with the big question, of course, what does the Kremlin do next? Keir, thank you. Also tonight, new surveillance footage is coming into us, showing what may be some of the final moments. A missing University of Pittsburgh student was last seen in the Dominican Republic. Here's the video here. Police in the DR tell NBC News that is Sadiqa Kanaki at the back of the group, wearing what looks like a white dress. You see her spotlit there. She's got her arm around one of the friends she was traveling with, who's there in a white tank top. Police say the group was headed to the beach area of the resort they were staying at right around 4 in the morning. This was Thursday. They say her friends came back to the hotel, but she did not. Officers are now re-interviewing friends and workers at the resort as crews are on the ground looking for the 20-year-old. You see they got helicopters up, they've got drones, they've got divers, etc. Jesse Kirsch is live for us. He has made his way to the DR. He is joining us now. And Jesse, a lot of new details have developed today on where investigators are in this process. Talk to us about some of these new clues.
Yeah, so Hallie, a couple of new pieces of information we were able to confirm with police today. They tell us that at least twice since this investigation has began, they've had a team on the beach overnight watching what's going on out there, watching what the water does, where the waves are crashing, where the current is moving, because they want to try to understand what would potentially happen to someone's body if they had drowned. At the same time, police would not say definitively that is their leading theory, that this missing college student drowned. They haven't said one way or the other definitively if foul play was involved. So there's still a lot of open-ended questions, but that gives us insight into at least some of what investigators have been working on. In terms of the potential for foul play, police also tell us that there was no blood, no sign of aggression, no sign of violence found on the beach. And finally, another piece of information that we learned today is that Kunanki's friends, we know, went back to the resort and then they did not see her again. And what police told us today is that the friends went on an excursion during the day, and it wasn't until around 4 p.m. on Thursday when her friends realized that she was missing. So there was about a 12-hour gap from when they last saw her to when they realized she was missing. So that's 12 hours of movement unaccounted for. And so we'll be looking to see, of course, in the days ahead, if that factors in at all, that lag time and authorities first starting to get alerted to this. And, you know, what that might lead to, Hallie. But, again, still a lot of unanswered questions here. The family clearly distraught, sharing with us today. They're asking for privacy in what is an unimaginably difficult time.
Jesse, there is, I think, a degree of dissonance to look at your live shot there from Punta Cana, which is, of course, a huge tourist destination. And there are people who are, you know, going about their regular business. They are there, presumably on vacation. We're seeing people jogging behind you in the water, et cetera. Are you hearing any level of concern from tourists? Are they aware of the search, you know, and what's happening, et cetera?
Yeah, so people we've talked to certainly know what has happened here. I can tell you, you might be able to hear the music behind me. You mentioned there are people still in the water at this late hour. It's quieter. Of course, the sun's starting to go down here right now. But if someone just dropped in here right now, they'd have no idea what had unfolded here last week. Earlier, we saw a group of military officials from the Dominican Republic in camouflage, police out here. There was a chopper overhead, a drone, a team on a boat, a canine. So there were signs of an investigation and not what you would expect typically. But it was a very strange dichotomy because you got that going on, and they were surrounded by dozens of people who were tanning, who were going in the water. So I can tell you, Hallie, is people, by and large here, do not seem deterred enough to be, you know, cutting short their plans here. Hallie.
Jesse Kirsch, live for us there in Punta Cana for us tonight. Jesse, thank you very much. Back here in Washington, the Transportation Secretary says he will take up this urgent call from investigators looking into that deadly January plane crash over the Potomac to permanently ban almost all helicopters from this often used route through Washington. And Sean Duffy's getting pretty upset that this happened at all, that this crash happened at all, despite a lot of data, which we'll get into in a second, that he says should have raised red flags. Listen.
Does it piss me off? Yes. And that's not an appropriate word maybe for a secretary to use, but of course. That the data was there, it wasn't effectively analyzed. To see that we had this kind of risk at DCA makes me angry.
Remember, everybody on board, both that American Airlines plane and that Black Hawk helicopter, were killed when the two collided and ended up in the Potomac. 67 people died on that day. You can see many of their names and faces here. NBC's Tom Costello is following this for us. What is the Transportation Secretary seeing that has him, in his words, so pissed off?
Well, he's upset, and so is the NTSB chair, because the NTSB went back and looked at all the data of how often they've had close calls. But first, let me show you what the route is, the helicopter route to come down in and around Reagan National Airport, right down the Potomac River. It's a helicopter route called Route 4. It's pre-designated, and that's the route that you've got to be on if you're a chopper coming down near Reagan Airport. And you're supposed to stay closer to the right side of your screen there, right on the right side of the river if you're looking to the north there. Well, the trouble is they ran the numbers, and the numbers of close calls are just off the charts, really staggering. The NTSB says that from October of 2021 to December of 24, 15,214 close calls between helicopters and planes. Just an astonishing number. And 85% of them were, in fact, very close, in some cases less than 200 feet, vertical feet separation between the plane and the chopper. So the question is, wait a minute. This data has been out there so easily that the NTSB pulled it up out of public files, right? It's not hidden anywhere. And the NTSB is saying, why in the world has the FAA not taken action over the past few years to do something about this risk? And that is what Secretary Duffy was talking about. Take a listen.
I think the question is, when this data comes in, how did the FAA not know? How did they not study the data to say, hey, this is a hot spot, we're having near misses, and if we don't change our way, we're going to lose lives? That wasn't done. Maybe there was a focus on something other than safety.
Well, Duffy has said all along that the previous DOT was focused on DEI programs. But I will tell you that, listen, This has been an issue that people have been screaming about for years. It goes back pre-Biden administration. They've been screaming about the risk between planes and helicopters at Reagan National Airport, about how close they are to each other. The airport's been upset. The airlines have been upset. Individuals have raised the red flag, and yet for some reason, the FAA didn't do anything about it.
One of the things we also heard from Secretary Duffy today, Tom, was this idea of tech upgrades to aviation systems that he and officials say will really help when it comes to these issues like safety and efficiency. How easy is that, right? And you know sort of uniquely how interconnected these systems are. How easy will it be to reimagine the tech like that at a time when there is sort of this very hard look that the government is taking at efficiency?
Listen, it is widely accepted across all political parties that the United States air traffic control system is safe right now, but antiquated. We are relying on systems that date back 50 and 60 years. So to do a complete and total upgrade is going to cost tens of billions of dollars, according to Duffy, who today called on Congress to act immediately. Don't delay on that. So we're talking about going from copper wires to fiber and wireless satellites. And yes, some of that is Elon Musk's Starlink satellites, new radar systems, getting away from 1970s and 80s technology, new ATC terminals and new sensors for runways to detect if there is an impending or a looming mid-runway crash, if you will, or an intrusion. Listen, some of that's already in place. We already have runway detection systems, but not at every airport. And the problem is that for years and years and years, the FAA has been screaming at Congress, give us the money, please, we got to upgrade. And I'll just give you an analysis. They ask for, $10, and Congress gives them $5. So they have underfunded this for decades. And now the DOT secretary under Trump is saying the time is now, and you got to spend the money now.
Tom Costello, glad to have you reporting all of this out for us after a fairly significant day of developments on that front. Tom, thank you. So listen, when it comes to sort of the business world and the airline world more generally here, for years, you've probably heard the commercials from Southwest. Watch.
These bags right here, they fly free. Bags have it made. Except on other airlines, where they charge you up to $120 round trip.
We think bag fees are a joke. Perfect for April Fools.
2 bags fly free. That's a big flex.
I mean, they said it. That's a big flex. That's their big thing, that bags fly free, right? Well, used to be. But now, starting in May, there's going to be a catch for Southwest. Only some bags fly free, because the airline plans to get rid of its 2 bags, no charge program for most customers. Southwest has been under a lot of pressure from one of its investors to make some serious changes. And as it's gotten bigger over the years, Southwest has been struggling to keep costs down and revenue up. But this change, and a few others the airline is making, are kind of a gamble, because it's the stuff like free bags, right, that helps set it apart from competitors. Southwest has more passengers than any other U.S. airline, and it has been #1 in North America in the traveler rankings for 3 years. People love Southwest. They have a loyal customer base. Will that continue? That's one of the big questions here. And all of it happening against the backdrop of what's expected to be less travel overall, with Delta and American also cutting first quarter forecasts because of economic weakness and uncertainty. Leslie Josephs is joining us now. Leslie, 2 bags fly free. That is a registered trademark on Southwest. Sorry, right? I mean, this policy change is a big deal and just one of several changes Southwest is making. Explain that. Explain why.
That is a very big deal. I've gotten a lot of reader mail today. So Southwest, for the more than 50 years that it's been flying, has been offering 2 bags fly free. And over the years, over the decades, we've seen every other American airline start charging for bags. And over time, they keep increasing the bag fees. But Southwest was the holdout. And what we've heard from Southwest executives, what we've heard from customers for years, is that the reason that they fly Southwest, the #1 reason, or one of the top reasons, is because of the 2 bags flying free. And now that's changing. They pretty much just caved to the pressure.
Delta, the competitors are noticing this. The head of Delta said today at this conference that this is an opportunity, basically saying customers are up for grabs now. Meaning there is this question of whether this may give Southwest some short-term wins financially here, but are they long-term risking some brand identity here?
They are taking a really big gamble. I mean, this is such a major part of Southwest's policy, along with open seating, something else that they're going to do away with, something they announced last year. They're going to have assigned seats. You know, we all know the cattle call boarding, love it or hate it. That's going away for assigned seats, extra legroom seats, and things like the more, fuller service airlines like American and Delta and United. So Southwest has previously said, we could get billions of dollars from bags, but we are risking losing market share. So it remains to be seen whether this actually does pay off for them. But there is more than $5 billion airlines have brought in bag fees just for most of 2024, not even the full year.
And you can see their expected gains and losses from that bag fee change there. Leslie Josephs, always great to have you on to break it down. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I want to bring you now an update to a story that we talked about just a couple of minutes ago. Those apparently sweeping layoff notices of the Department of Education expected to affect 50% of its workforce. That's roughly 2,100 workers. Remember, that is the smallest cabinet agency, I should say, in the federal government. The president, remember, has floated a potential executive order to basically get rid of the agency entirely, but he cannot do that without Congress. That is partly why Education Secretary Linda McMahon has said the department's focus will be on the programs already approved by Congress, like student loans or funding for special needs students. Two sources say all staff will be asked to take laptops home and work from home tomorrow, with people laid off asked to clean out their desks. We'll bring you more as we get it. Also tonight, in just the last couple of minutes, House Republicans hanging together to squeak through a vote to keep the government up and running past a Friday deadline. This is a live look at the House floor here. The vote was very close, but still passed, even with one Republican voting with nearly every Democrat. You also had one Democrat who crossed party lines to vote for the bill. Okay, process talk over. What does this actually mean? Is the government going to stay open? We still don't know. That's because it depends largely on the man you're looking at here, of course, top Senate Republican John Thune, and what happens in the Senate. That's when this will they, won't they game of shutdown showdown continues. The Senate still has to vote. We'll see if they are able to get it done before Friday at midnight. You know we'll be all over it as that story develops. We've also got a lot more to get to here on the show, including coming up some dramatic new video showing the moment a 9-year-old saved his classmate from choking. How they're both doing tonight. Plus, why Tiger Woods says he's not going to be playing competitive golf anytime soon. So with President Trump's tariffs threatening to spike the price of new cars by as much as $12,000, the president now appears to be in the market for a new car of his own. And surprising no one, it's going to be a Tesla, we guess, with the South Lawn turning into a showcase as Elon Musk joins his friend and confidant for a kind of a photo op here as Tesla gets hammered in the markets and at some dealerships. The president saying he wants to label people who attack Teslas as domestic terrorists.
When you heard an American company, especially a company like this, supplies so many jobs that others are unable to do, when you do that, those people are going to go through a big problem when we catch them. And we got a lot of cameras up. We already know who some of them are. We're going to catch them. And they're bad guys.
To be clear, you're legally allowed to protest against whatever company you want, even one run by arguably the world's second most powerful man. Now, it doesn't mean you can do this, like setting a Cybertruck you don't own on fire, like what we saw in Seattle. You can see it in the daylight here, totally torched. There it is. That's not legal, right? A boycott would be. And as we've reported on this show, those seem to be growing from coast to coast. Vaughn Hilliard is joining us now. Why today? Like, why does the president today feel like he needs to go to bat for Tesla here?
Look at a couple parts to this, Hallie. Number one, if you date back to the middle of December, during the transition after President Trump won the election, well, in the middle of December, stock for Tesla was doing pretty well. In the 3 months since, it's dropped by 50%, largely in protest to Elon Musk's political work here at the White House that has received a lot of pushback. And, I think it's really stark, actually, to see the president of the United States standing out and touting these electric vehicles. Because if you go back 1 year ago, well, out on the campaign trail, the president and then candidate had a very different message when it came to electric vehicles. Take a listen.
I think they're fine if you like to go short distances. If you want to take a trip, I don't think you want to do that. I don't recommend electric. We are a nation whose leaders are demanding all electric cars, even though they can't go far, cost too much, and whose batteries are produced in China. They don't go far enough. And they are more expensive, right?
A stark contrast to what we saw here today, effectively an advertisement for Tesla and for Elon Musk. And he was directly asked by a reporter whether he was trying to boost the stock price of Tesla. And the president this afternoon said, yes, I hope so.
What's interesting here, and let's pull back a little bit big picture, because we've talked about the sort of Tesla stock drop here. You just mentioned it. We've talked about it on the show in the prior weeks. It is not just Musk seeing a dip in the value of either, his net worth, his companies, et cetera. Some of these other top billionaires who have shown support for the president are also seeing some dips in their net worth reportedly since the election. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg among them. Is there a pressure campaign from any of these other, billionaires on the president behind the scenes, do we know? To try to turn their fortunes around, basically?
Right. It's a really good question. I think actually a meeting that is ongoing as we speak right now will be a good indicator of that. There's actually it's called the Business Roundtable. It's a group of more than 200 CEOs in the country. You're talking about the top corporate leaders, arguably the most influential business lobbying group that there is. You're talking about Tim Cook. You're talking about Mary Barra from GM. You're talking about some of those other CEOs that you just showed up on screen, and they're having a private closed-door meeting with the president at their quarterly meeting here in Washington, and they have been vocal, especially when it comes to their opposition to tariffs. If you take Apple, for example, a large part of their manufacturing base is not only in China, but also key parts that are used for domestic production are also key and integral here. And so there is an effort for exemptions from those tariffs here. And all of this that's happening is we've watched the stock market, particularly over the last 2 weeks, tumble. And so there's sort of a dichotomy of, unlike 8 years ago when the president first entered office, there was some reticence towards him by corporate leaders. This go around, you saw a great number of those folks that you just showed up on screen running and sitting in the first row of his inauguration. But yet we're seeing economic consequences here that clearly are frustrating to them and raise serious questions about the economic decisions coming from this White House in the days and weeks ahead.
Vaughn Hilliard, thank you very much for that reporting live for us there outside the White House. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, police now arresting a captain of a container ship on suspicion of manslaughter after that collision off the coast of England we told you about last night. Remember, that ship hit an American fuel tanker, leading to this very scary, fiery scene. Police say they have ended the search for a missing crew member and are still speaking with everyone involved. Number 2. The legal team for the Columbia grad arrested by ICE over the weekend says he will not be at tomorrow's court hearing. Mahmoud Khalil helped organize pro-Palestinian rallies, and a judge blocked his deportation after ICE agents under the Trump administration said his student visa was getting revoked. Khalil's attorney says he is a legal permanent resident with a green card. Number 3, a DOJ official says she was fired for refusing to restore Mel Gibson's gun rights. Gibson, who is a supporter of President Trump's, lost those rights after a domestic violence misdemeanor conviction back in 2011. In a statement to NBC News, Elizabeth Oyer said people in the DOJ are, in her words, afraid to voice their opinions because dissent is being punished. A Justice Department official denies the allegations. Number 4, another health setback for Tiger Woods. The golfer says he's recovering from surgery after rupturing his left Achilles tendon. Woods online is thanking fans for their support. He says his doctor does expect a full recovery, but that'll keep him out of the game competitively for the short term. Number 5, check out this video out of North Carolina. School surveillance cameras capturing the moments a 9-year-old saves his friend by using the Heimlich maneuver. Look at that. He tells our Raleigh station he learned to do it on YouTube. The friend, just 7 years old, was apparently choking on a granola bar. School leaders celebrated the older kiddo, calling him a hero. And listen to this. He requested his friend be celebrated right alongside him, too. You love to see it. When we come back, why the medical team for one of the world's biggest sports stars ever is now going on trial today. Plus, a desperate search for answers tonight in Pakistan. What we're learning about a hostage situation on a passenger train. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Pakistan, some families there desperate for answers tonight after separatist militants said they took hostages during an attack on a passenger train while hundreds of people were on board. It's not clear how many people were taken, potentially dozens. The Pakistani Interior Minister condemned the attack and says the government will not make any concessions. Out of the Philippines, the ex-president there, Rodrigo Duterte, is going to The Hague in the Netherlands today. The International Criminal Court is accusing him of crimes against humanity. Rights groups say tens of thousands of unarmed suspects were murdered in extrajudicial killings during Duterte's war on drugs. He has denied the allegations. And out of England, the world-famous soccer team, Manchester United, says it's going to say goodbye to its century-old stadium, the Old Trafford. Instead, Man U will build a new stadium for like $2.5 billion. One of the team's co-owners says it'll be the world's greatest football stadium. They're hoping this will create new jobs and attract new visitors. Man U, by the way, has won 9 of 28 games this season so far. Also overseas tonight, voters in Greenland heading to the polls today. And if you're about to mute me because you don't care at all about voters in Greenland heading to the polls today, hang on, stay here, because you know the backdrop to this, right? President Trump aggressively setting his sights on making Greenland part of America.
I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it.
All of it happening alongside growing calls from politicians for the island to declare independence from Denmark. Danielle Hamamjian is joining us now. And this Greenland thing, it's become this sort of buzzword ever since the president took office and started suggesting that Greenland should become America's, as he put it there, one way or the other. It goes with his calls to take back the Panama Canal. It goes sort of under the same umbrella as his push to make Canada the 51st state, et cetera. What is up with Greenland?
71.
First of all, that no other election in Greenland's history has ever garnered this much attention. Why does Donald Trump care so much about Greenland? Because there's a lot of money to be made there. This is a place that is rich in rare earth minerals, things like lithium, copper, nickel, things that you need to make wind turbines, electric vehicles, batteries. The Greenland is known to have 43 out of the 50 minerals deemed critical by the U.S. government. However, this place has a harsh climate, Hallie, and 80% of Greenland, of course, is covered in ice. The thinking, however, is as that ice melts, it would open shipping routes. It would make it easier to access the mines, to drill for oil. It is also, as you know, a place that has a U.S. military base. The DoD has its northernmost installation there in Greenland, which is essential for its ballistic missile system. And it is so close to Russia, of course, so in the eyes of the U.S. government, it is a critical location.
Okay, but the Danish prime minister says they're not going to give Greenland to the U.S. A Danish newspaper shows people in Greenland do not want to be taken over by the U.S. So President Trump is the driving force here. But if, you know, Denmark says no and Greenland says no, what is the other option?
Well, so Denmark is behind everything. When it comes to defense and foreign policy, Denmark calls the shots. When it comes to the annual budget, Denmark is behind half of it. However, today when people were going to the polls, yes, they were thinking about health care and cost of living, just like any other election in the world. But so many people were talking about the independence movement and this break from Denmark. Those comments you heard from Donald Trump, people were disgusted by those comments, and it has galvanized the independence movement because they see that now there is global attention on this election. We're talking about it. We wouldn't have been talking about it in previous years. And so most parties are in favor of independence. They only disagree on the timeline and how quickly they should do it.
Danielle Hamamjian, thank you very much for that. Also tonight, a huge trial is beginning over the death of a soccer legend as people in Argentina literally take to the streets to demand justice. They're out there calling for justice, pointing the finger at the doctors of Diego Maradona, who is just hugely, massively famous in that country. Think Messi before Messi, right? Maradona brought home the World Cup in 1986. He's just a major source of national pride there. Well, now 7 medical staffers are facing up to 25 years behind bars, accused of negligence and manslaughter after Maradona went into cardiac arrest at home in Buenos Aires in 2020. They have all denied wrongdoing. Priscilla Thompson is joining us now. And Priscilla, for the very beginning of this trial, day 1 today, Maradona's family was in the courtroom in tears at points, right?
Yeah, a very emotional day, Hallie, for his family, including his daughters and also his ex-partner, all who were in the courtroom as these 7 healthcare professionals were preparing to stand trial or beginning to stand trial today. And they include a neurosurgeon and a psychiatrist. As you noted, he was at home recovering from brain surgery due to a blood clot in 2020 when he suffered cardiac arrest and ultimately died. And of course, now we are seeing this trial go to fruition. And just to explain to you the charges, they are, quote, homicide with possible intent. And so, according to the AP, he was under the care of these doctors at a home, and they pushed for him to be treated at home when in fact, he may have been better served inside a hospital facility. But important to note that all 7 of these defendants have pled not guilty. Hallie?
Maradona openly struggled with drug addiction both during and after his soccer career. How might the defense highlight that?
Yeah, for decades, this is something that he talked about publicly, the struggles with cocaine and alcohol addiction. We know that even during his storied career, it led to 2 very long expulsions from games where he wasn't allowed to play, and even a time period where he experienced a high-profile drug bust off of the field. But it's unclear to what extent the defense is really going to bring this up and make this a part of the case. Obviously, we know doctors have talked about how cocaine use can impact people's health and particularly the heart. But ultimately, it's going to be up to this 3-judge panel to decide to what extent that played a role in this case, if and when the defense brings it up, and whether or not these doctors hold any accountability. Hallie?
Priscilla Thompson, thank you very much for that, one that Argentina and the world is watching. Coming up, we are checking back in with one patient about living with long COVID 5 years to the day after the pandemic officially started. That's next. To tonight's original now, with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight, it's the somber commemoration of 5 years to the day since COVID officially became a worldwide pandemic. You probably remember where you were when Tom Hanks announced he had it. Remember March 11th? When that NBA game paused right before tip-off because of it, when President Trump delivered that Oval Office address that same night. COVID's not exactly a thing of the past, but a lot has changed since then, especially for the millions of Americans living with the ongoing symptoms of long COVID. Here's Dr. John Torres.
Empty streets, hospitals overwhelmed, uncertainty and fear. 5 years since life came to a standstill, COVID declared a pandemic and a national emergency.
The coronavirus outbreak declared a global pandemic.
But for Shamir Sweeney, it still feels kind of like the first day.
Medical professionals at those hospitals in Baltimore were telling me, you know what, just give it 2 weeks and you'll be fine. My 2 weeks never came.
While the pandemic has faded into the background for many of us, Shamir Sweeney is one of millions of Americans the CDC says is dealing with long COVID, having symptoms that linger long after getting infected.
I stopped being able to walk without any type of assistance. Migraines, blurry vision.
Sweeney got COVID in March of 2020. She was an English teacher in Baltimore when the pandemic hit. Still, she deals with a slew of symptoms like brain fog, body pain, and memory loss, and has a pile of pills to manage them.
This is my acid reflux medication.
We've spoken with Sweeney several times over the years about her condition.
It's hard for me to walk. I actually just was approved for disability. There are times when I still sit and cry.
And now?
5 years later, I can't remember my healthy body. I can't remember my healthy mind.
Dr. Mark Sala, co-director of Northwestern's Comprehensive COVID-19 Center, says doctors have several hypotheses for what causes long COVID, but still don't fully understand who's most at risk for it.
I see plenty of folks who have, for all we know, a good immune system, have been vaccinated,
and have done everything well from that standpoint to protect themselves, and will still come in with 6 months of fatigue.
Do COVID vaccines protect you in any way against developing long COVID?
Vaccines prevent against severity of infection, and severity of infection is well linked to having bad consequences from COVID infection.
And answers may be getting further out of reach, with President Trump cutting the Long COVID Advisory Committee last month to get rid of what he called unnecessary parts of the federal bureaucracy. Long COVID patients like Sweeney say it's a blow. She's also worried about losing government disability support, saying working an in-person job is out of reach.
There are days that I can't even get out of the bed.
Researchers at Harvard estimate long COVID has cost the economy over $3 trillion between reduced earnings, increased medical spending, and lost quality of life. Even though Sweeney can't return to the classroom, she's now teaching in a new way, founding the Black Long COVID Experience and sharing resources with others.
That's my goal, to galvanize more Black people.
So as Sweeney slogs through the symptoms, she knows she's not alone.
Dr. John Torres is joining us now. So, Dr. John, if people do, you talk about it there, she knows she's not alone. If others have these lingering long COVID symptoms, what are they supposed to do? I assume be in touch with their doctors?
Exactly, Hallie. And the first thing is to realize it could be long COVID, because these symptoms could be subtle, but the definition is if you have some of these symptoms 3 months after having COVID, then it could be long COVID. And we're talking fatigue, brain fog, muscle aches, lack of sleep or not ability to get to sleep. If you're having those kinds of symptoms and they simply linger and don't seem to go away, definitely talk to your doctor. There are things that can be done. We have no treatments right now. We have no cures for it, but we're certainly making some headway, and we want to make sure people are taken care of, especially their mental health, because it can take a toll on that as well, Hallie.
Dr. John Torres, thank you very much. Still to come here on the show, one of the most popular Democrats in the country making a move back in a big way. What Michelle Obama and her brother are apparently saying about things like the divorce process and post-White House life. That's next. One of the most popular Democrats in the country, and one of the more low-profile Democrats ever since President Trump's election win, is stepping back into the spotlight in a big way. First Lady Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, tomorrow launching a new podcast with her brother, Craig Robinson, in which both of them apparently get vulnerable on some tricky stuff.
We are so excited for you to listen to our brand new podcast. It's called IMO with Michelle Obama and Craig Robinson. Together, Craig and I are going to take your questions about the challenges you're grappling with in life.
IMO, like in my opinion. The former First Lady reportedly talks about what her life is like now, like how after years of Secret Service protection, she started driving again. It's just the latest in the Obama's growing media portfolio. The couple signed that big Netflix deal a few years ago, even expanding their partnership now to create more content. Chloe Malas is joining us now. And Chloe, talk through this sort of new venture, because it is a splashy debut, or at least, of course, Michelle Obama hopes that that is what it will be. Coming out tomorrow with the podcast. I think they're going to South by Southwest the day after that. And really framing this as both of them opening up about some of the more vulnerable moments.
So I think that this is really an interesting choice. She's going to be doing this podcast with her brother. The first episode, which the New York Times has listened to, they've actually listened to the first two. It's about her and her brother talking about growing up together in Chicago, sharing a bedroom together, living in this tiny little apartment, and they're going to tackle all sorts of relationship issues. They're going to be talking about her brother's divorce. They're going to talk about adult friendships. They have Issa Rae on the second episode. And this is really in line with what Michelle Obama has been doing since leaving the White House. She and former President Barack Obama, they launched Higher Ground, a really successful production company where they've had all sorts of TV shows and films. They've had Becoming. They've had Fatherhood, Our Ocean, Starting 5, American Symphony. The list goes on and on. Even a show about dating later in life, which I stumbled upon recently and absolutely loved. And they are also, Hallie, going to have a lot of guests, from Seth Rogen to Jay Shetty, Tyler Perry. So obviously Michelle Obama is going to be leaning into her celebrity connections. But one thing you're not going to be hearing about, though, is politics. She said it in her memoir, and she has said it again. She is not going to be talking about politics.
You know, there's a lot of Democrats who, prior to November had hoped she would talk about politics, right? Because she remains one of the more popular figures inside the Democratic Party, but has not been super public on the scene in the last couple of months, Chloe.
I mean, look, as we know, President Trump had said that he thought that perhaps Michelle Obama might run for president. And so you might wonder if he will be listening in to these episodes. What I think is going to be interesting is that it's not just the podcast. There is the visual component to it, which is more popular with podcasts these days. So we're going to actually get to see video of Michelle and these guests. And it's going to be really exciting to see how this does. But so far, everything that Michelle Obama has done since leaving the White House, she's had that Midas touch, Hallie.
Chloe Malas, thank you very much for that. We'll see when it all drops tomorrow. Appreciate it. That's a wrap for this hour. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.